Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of China 101. Don't forget to click like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below, and let us know what you think about today's episode. And feel free to leave a question down below. And if we find your question valid and interesting, we will definitely try to address that in our next episode. So today we want to talk to you about one-child policy um, and why there's one child policy and how they all got started, because one child policy is pretty much a special feature of the Chinese Communist government, because no communist government in other country has ever implemented something similar. You look at the Soviet Union, you can look at Cuba, you can look at the current Venezuela, you can look at North Korea. Even North Koreans don't have a one-child policy. So why did the Chinese have a one-child policy, and what was its purpose, and what ended up happening? What was the consequence after decades of implementation? So the origin of the one-child policy didn't start until 1949, after the communists took over China. And even when we look back thousands of years of ancient China, no emperors or country leaders ever implemented or even thought about something like this. After the communists took over and Chairman Mao became the first chairman of the People's Republic, some type of population control was being suggested. For example, there were propaganda from the Chinese central government that encourages families to only have 2 children, and also the central government started introduce birth control programs, and condoms started to become very popular around this time. So that is one of the contributions that Chairman Mao did to the Chinese people. And this kind of voluntary program, brainwashing propaganda program, to encouraging people to only have 2 kids, started in the early 50s, and it lasted all the way until 1976, the year that Chairman Mao passed away. But however, despite the fact that Mao was one of the most brutal dictators in human history, he actually never implemented any kinds of population control by force. Obviously, Chairman Mao had the Great Leap Forward program and the Cultural Revolution. You strictly speaking, that was some kinds of population control, but he never went so far to touch the females' bellies. Now, the current one-child policy we know about actually started in the late 70s and early 80s. So after Mao's death in 1976, Deng Xiaoping came into power, and he implemented a voluntary program in 1978. And that program was the reason why that program was published is because in the late 70s, the Chinese population was rapidly approaching 1 billion. And there were fears across the Chinese Communist Party that the population will get out of control, and there won't be enough food to support all of these Chinese people. And with the lack of food, the lack of food always leads to a revolution. If you look at Chinese history, all of the peasant revolts were pretty much caused by lack of food and heavy taxation. So obviously, the Chinese Communist government looked into controlling birth rates, and Deng's voluntary program encourages all families in China, rural or city, to have 2 children at most. And he suggested that government prefer families to have 1 child. And thus, the original concept of one-child policy was born. But keep in mind, at this stage, one-child policy was still not a law. And thus, there were many families who didn't participate in this voluntary program suggested by Deng in 1978. The official start date of the one-child policy came in approximately 3 years later. So after the previous voluntary program was implemented by the Chinese Communist Party, the central government found out that not many Chinese people participated in the program. They were not really excited about only having 2 children or even 1 children, and the population continued to grow at a really fast pace. And thus, on September the 25th, 1980, in a public letter that addressed the nation, China officially started implementing the one-child policy, and it has become law. Such policy was standardized across the nation. However, there were exceptions. For example, certain minorities in China were allowed to have more than 1 child, and for some families, if your firstborn was handicapped, these families would be allowed to have another child. Now, after decades of one-child policy, what kind of consequence we are seeing right now? So, one of the first consequence of this one-child policy is there's a imbalance between males and females. Since the majority of Chinese families are limited to 1 children after September 1980, in rural areas, families start to abort female fetuses in droves, because pension was pretty much non-existent in rural China. Having a boy was the only way for the parents to have some kinds of insurance when they get old and can no longer work in the rice fields. If a family gave birth to a girl, the girl will be married to the husband's family, and her parents will be left behind. In addition, China's farming industry still heavily depended on manpower. The majority of the farmers or peasants can never afford expensive modern farming equipment, and therefore boys are much preferred because they are born with better physique. As a result, China now has 4% more males than females, and in a country of 1.4 billion, that is around 40 million to 50 million men who will never get matched with a woman, and that is sad. And the second most terrifying consequence of the one-child policy is an aging population. Although China is still a developing country, China has one of the worst aging population in the world. After decades of implementing one-child policy, China does not have enough young population to support the previous generation. Because for every young person who is working full-time right now, he or she now needs to support 2 people that are dipping into pension. When the current young generation in China start to hit 60s and need to dip into pension, there will be nothing left for them. And when that time comes, who will take care of them? And finally, the darkest consequence of one-child policy was the widespread of forced abortion. In order to effectively implement the one-child policy, the Communist Party created many forms of punishment. From giving you a heavy fine to laying you off if you work in the public sector. Therefore, countless pregnant Chinese women were forced to kill their babies because they do not want to pay that heavy fine. And for those who work in the public sector, babies were aborted because these women did not want to lose their jobs. The CCP also have operatives in both the public and private sector to track married women and record their first pregnancy. If these operatives find out a female was pregnant again, they would report the case to higher up. Then the victim would either have to pay a heavy fine, lose her job, or in most cases, abort the baby. Of course, for those women or families who doesn't care about fines or losing their jobs, the CCP would send in the police and take these women away to the local abortion clinics. They would then tie these women up in a bed, and they conduct abortion operation on these women completely without families or mothers' consent. Mothers were screaming off the top of their lungs, begging the doctors not to abort their children. Many babies who were aborted came out alive. Of course, it doesn't matter if a baby was 3 months or 9 months, they all suffer the same fate: death. After the abortion operation was completed, these traumatized mothers would then be sterilized, and they would never be able to have another child. For those audiences who wanted to know more about forced abortion during the one-child policy era, there is a great documentary called One Child Nation, which is available on Amazon Prime, which did a great job documenting the darkest corner of one-child policy. In conclusion, the one-child policy is an absolute failure of the Chinese Communist Party. It once again shows us that the government trying to meddling with people's lives, the result is always negative. Not only there are 40 million Chinese men who cannot find a partner right now, the people who are lucky to get married need to support 4 parents because you are supporting your parents and your wife's parent or vice versa. And China's pension reserve is drying up fast. And all those forced abortions that the CCP conducted on those innocent mothers were nothing short of a crime against humanity. Based on estimate, from 1980, the start of one-child policy, to 2016, which is the official end year of one-child policy, approximately 400 million, and you heard that right, 400 million Chinese babies were aborted. Here at TNT, we hope these babies who never got a chance to live are now resting at a better place. And remember this, our listeners, the only ideologies that kill more people than fascism are socialism and communism. And that is my presentation today regarding the one-child policy, and we are now open for questions.
Okay, so I'm just going to ask you a question on behalf of one of our audience here. So he said, hey, Mandarin, do you think that the polyandry can work in the Chinese society? That is to say, for those who doesn't know this word polyandry, it means that could a woman have more than one husband or two husbands or even more? So do you think that based on the current situation that the population of male and female are quite imbalanced, then do you think that would happen in China? Yeah.
I don't think that will happen in China because how, I mean, I don't even understand how that kind of family would work. So if for example, if the female and the first male partner had a baby, are the other 4 guys supposed to also chip in to raise the baby? And if you are if you are the parent of this of the female, do you actually want your daughters to go to bed with 5 different guys at the same time? So I don't know. I don't know how this kind of family structure would actually work in China, and I don't even know if this kind of family structure would work anywhere in the world right now. So the answer to that is I don't think it will work.
Yeah, I agree. So Alex, do you have any questions?
Yes, I do have a question because several years ago, China actually, can you hear me? I'm just trying to make sure my microphone is working.
Yeah.
Sure, good.
Okay, and actually several years ago, China is actually let go of the one-child policy. So right now, if both of the mom and dad are all like the only child, they can actually have 2 kids. But the funny part is the birth rate in that generation, even though they let go of the one-child policy, not many people choose to have the second baby. So what do you think, Mandarin, for you? Like, what do you think is the reason that, even though they already have the rights to have the second baby, but they still choose not to?
The answer is actually pretty simple. It's because babies are extremely expensive in China. I mean, unlike many of the developed worlds, the government doesn't do much for Chinese families to help them raise their babies. However, if you are Chinese parents and you want to raise your baby good, there's a lot of expense. There's a huge amount of expense. One of the prime example is school districts. So now, I mean, China wanted to kind of mimic what the West is doing. Where you have your resident you can go to a local school of your residence. But the biggest difference between China and the West is that the education resources is not really well balanced. In some area of the city, you have many good schools, and And in some other areas, there's no good schools. But the funny thing is, in the United States, you have a thing called charter schools. So if you live in a neighborhood with crappy schools, you can send your kids to another neighborhood with good schools. But anyway, that aside, the only way that you can go into a good school right now is you have to have residence in a particular neighborhood. For example, I mean, if you if you are a parent living in Beijing, the only way for you to get into, Haidian middle school, which is one of the best middle school in Beijing, is you have to have a residence near Haidian middle school, and where Haidian is located is one of the most expensive neighborhood in Beijing. So only not many parents in China can afford expensive real estate, and that is one of the things that associated with raising a kid. You want him to have good schools. You want this kid to be raised up right, and also other things. For example, in China, because the lack of the lack of food quality check. We have poisoned milk. We even have poisoned eggs. Like everything is poisoned. So when you're raising a kid in China, you don't want your kid to get poisoned by poisoned milk, because that actually happened in when was that? Like 2013, the poisoned milk incident. Like 10,000, over 100,000 babies got poisoned, and some of the baby ended up dying because of kidney failures, because the poison attacked your kidney. So without proper food quality check, as a Chinese parents, the best they can do is to buy foreign products, and that is why that is why a lot of international students, when they go back to China, they have a case full of milk, full of Australian milk. They have a case full of vitamins, Canadian vitamins and Canadian supplements, and they have a case full of Alaska salmons. It's because, and the reason why they do that is because the food in China is poisonous. There's no quality check. So that is another expensive thing Chinese parents need to do if they want to raise their kids right. And also the final and another thing is, China, the school in China is really, really tough. You want your kids to get ahead, so you need to send your kids to all kinds of study schools, night schools, weekend schools, summer schools. All these things cost money, and these like night schools, summer schools, weekend schools, they ain't cheap. They are not cheap. These are all extra costs that are associated with raising a kid, and a lot of these extra costs happen because of the society, right? There's nothing a parent can do to change the education system of China, so your kids have to go to weekend schools. There's nothing a parent can do to change the food quality of China, so you have to buy milk from Australia. So and that is the reason why. There's the reason why even after one-child policy was lifted, most parents still choose to have one kid, and a lot of parents choose to have one kid is because of family pressure. I personally know Chinese parents who doesn't want to have kids, doesn't want to have kids at all because it's so expensive. And some of them have it is because, oh my God, my parents have been nagging me having a kid for like 5 years now, ever since I hit 25, and now I'm 30-year-old, and they have been nagging about me having a kid for 5 years, and now I finally got married and have a kid. So yeah, so that is the reason why. That is the reason why people are not going crazy to have 2 kids.
Okay, thank you. I do agree, and well, I guess personally, people are also saying that with the higher education, it will comes like lower desire of having a baby. I don't know if that's true, but it works on me. So now we got Stacy Tan, because like yesterday on the show we said Stacy needed a history teacher, so here she comes. So Stacy, you got a question?
Yeah, I do have a question. So knowing that with the implementation of the one-child policy, there's an aging population because there's like less younger generations, and then like a higher like older population, and then as the life expectancy raises, there's a higher working age population. I mean, lower working age population who has to support a higher dependency ratio, whatever, yeah, something like that. And so why, like, knowing that the labor force like is pretty intense, why is like the labor cost in China still so low? Because like I know like the average salary or whatever in China is much lower than many other developing and developed countries. Wait.
That is a good question, but however, to a certain extent, I disagree with that statement because China is no longer the country with the lowest salaries. I mean, not even close. Not even close because right now, rising developing countries such as India, Pakistan, Vietnam, Philippines, they have way lower, even lower salaries than China. I mean, in the past 15 years, the salaries of Chinese people have risen significantly. But however, obviously, compared to the West, the salaries for the Chinese people are getting is absolutely trash. But compared to the new developing country, Vietnam, India, the salaries that the Chinese people are getting is actually not so bad anymore. However, there's another reason that causes the salaries for the Chinese people to stay relatively low, is because there's no labor laws in China. Like, seriously, there's no labor laws in China. You don't. I mean, as a factory owners, you can pay. Obviously, there's minimum wage. You pay the minimum wage for your workers, but you don't need to give them pensions. You don't need to give them, you don't need to give them healthcare. You don't need to give them 401k. You don't even need to pay them anything if they get hurt at work. If they lose a finger when they're working, if they lose a finger when they're working on the assembly line, oh, bye bye, go home. You're fired, lay off. You don't need to pay the worker anything. So from that perspective, the overall labor law and labor system, how labor is structured in China, can definitely keep the wages low compared to the West.
Okay. Can I continue with another question?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So my other question is that, like, given the one-child policy, like we still have that condition going on, although they're trying to like implement a two-child policy or like whatever, increase or promote childbirth. Like, what is the ultimate goal? Like, what are people trying to do with this policy? Like, do people want more children, or like they just want a children for the cause of like whatever, just having a next generation and be like supposedly responsible to like their ancestors, like to continue their bloodline? Like, why are people having children? Is it, yeah, that's my question.
Well, the reason for why people are having children, I mean, it really depends on the family. I mean, if you are a religious family, such as your family is Christian, your family is Catholic, by your creed, you're supposed to have children because because children are the gift from God, and also having more Christian children and more Catholic children is a really effective way to spread Christianity and spread Christianity. And so that is why in religious world, if you look at highly religious countries such as if take Islam for example, I mean all of the Middle Eastern countries, they have a lot of babies because I mean babies are baby is gift from God, and also having a lot of Muslim babies is one of the most effective way to spread the ideology of Islam. Which is it's like exact same thing with Catholic and Christians, and that is why if you're religious couple, it's highly likely that you will have babies because that is in your religion teaching. However, for a lot of for most of the Chinese people, they are not religious. So for the people that are still having babies, It's mostly for some of them is because the ideology of to continue the family line, that is still one of the biggest reason why people have kids. And also right now, people in rural China still want to have kids because for Chinese peasants, there aren't a lot of pensions going around. So if you don't have pensions, once you get old and can no longer work at your rice fields, you kind of needed some children to feed you and take care of you before you go into the grave. Now, from the government perspective, it's really easy. I mean, the government perspective is simple because when the governments, they need people to pitch into the pension fund, so the current generation of old people can be stable. For if you are an old person in China and your kids is no longer supporting you, I mean, as an old guy, the only thing that's keeping you alive is your pension. And if your pension one day just dried up, you have no more money, you starve to death. Like, it's that serious. So the Chinese government definitely don't want the pension to run dry, and they realize this is a national security issue because as our generation, the people that were born after the 80s, hit 60 years old, they don't have pensions because their pension has already been paid to the current generation, which is our mom and dad. Our mom and dads are draining our pension because there's only one person working for every two people that are dipping into the pensions. So it's drying up quick. The only way to solve this problem is to have the next generation, the people that were born after the 2000s, to have more of those people working when they hit the working age, so generation like us can dip into their pension and keep our generation stable. And this is basically a scheme. You need to keep having babies, otherwise pension will dry up. And when pension dried up, it's going to be a big society problem because you will have hundreds of millions of Chinese with no income, and they cannot buy food, and that is a big problem. Yep, that's my answer. Yeah.
Yeah, I do have another question because this topic does interest me a lot.
Yeah, it's
Like,
okay. We can do like more episodes about this. So because of the time, you can just please ask one more question. Okay.
Okay. So like, has the Chinese government tried anything else like to prevent, like at the time of implementation, to stop like overpopulation, to prevent overpopulation? So what was the goal of the Chinese Communist Party? Did they predict that this would happen? Like the population this 什么比例不平衡叫什么来着 whatever this that like what was the goal of the Chinese Communist Party? Like, was their goal to prevent
Actually, I
the
can ask
older
you the
population
question
to be
right
so?
now. Yeah, I think you have to look back history more, because at the beginning, how this began is they actually promote people to have more babies in the early time. So that's why, like in my grandma's family and my both my mom and dad side, they have many kids. Some of them even have 10 or more kids. That's at the beginning. The Chinese Communist Party encouraged them to have more baby. Later on, they realized that there are too many people. The population is over control, so they launched the one-child policy. So basically, either or of these two policies are ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense. So when you ask questions like what the Chinese Communist Party's plan and why they come out this, there is no science base. They just do whatever they want, and when they see it's it's out of control, they go a different way. So they always done that. They done that over and over and over again. So who is taking the consequence? The Chinese people. That's what I want to say. So I do understand your question, but you have to understand from the history point of view, that Chinese Communist Party doesn't really give a damn of the science. They don't do analyzing. So even though those scientists, they trying to persuade the government, this doesn't make sense. The president of that time just do whatever they want. So does the Three Gorges Dam. At the beginning, the project was a completely questioned by many scientists, but they still done it. So I think when we asking questions regarding how the Chinese government analyze things and why they done that, well,
They don't do that, right?
they just don't do it. There's no science base.
Yeah.
They don't back up their decision with data. There's no
Yeah.
science behind it. So
Yeah.
there is no answer for your question. You see?
So Mandarin, what do you think? What do you think, Stacy's question? That's Alex's opinion, and I agree with her. So Mandarin, what do you think? Do you still remember the question?
So yes, of course. I mean at the beginning, Chairman Mao encourages people to have more kids. Is because Chairman Mao believed the more the merrier. The merrier. So basically, the more people I have, the faster I can achieve socialism in China, because you have you have two people working on one thing compared to 100 people working on one thing. In most circumstances, the 100 people group will achieve something faster. So, Chairman Mao always wanted to achieve socialism and eventually communism in his lifetime. And one of the biggest other thing he wants to do is to take on the entire Western power. So, if you wanted to take on the entire Western power, having 100 million Chinese with 1 billion Chinese is definitely really different. Which is why until this day, China is feared by many Western worlds, is because those Western leaders like Italy, like Spain, like Portugal, when they look at China, they were like, "Oh my God, this is an enormous monster. We can't fight that. We have to work with the Chinese Communist Party because they have 1.4 billion people. How can we fight that? We must work with them. We must cooperate." Right. So definitely. I mean, when you look at it that way, I mean, Chairman Mao is right to a certain extent, but however, when you have unrestricted encouragement for people to give birth, you arrive at another problem, which is uncontrolled rapid population growth, which I mentioned in my presentation, that many senior party members starts to worry about this uncontrollable population growth, because when the food right now, you're going to have a peasant revolt. You look at Chinese history, you look at the 5,000 years of Chinese history, pretty much all of the dynasty, when the dynasty come to an end, it was usually ended by a peasant revolt, ever since the ending of the Qing dynasty, which was the first empire in China history. So when they see the population were rising rapidly, they started to get terrified. And in terror, the only method that came out is to control the woman's belly. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
to come to our end of today's show, China 101, I do have one favor to ask. So we have seen that on the wall of these pictures, and also we got posters, and we got these slogans. I would even call them like political slogans. So could you translate some of them to our Western audience, because they just look at the picture and doesn't know what it means, but what the reason why I picked those pictures was it's a shocking slogan that you would never see in Western countries, and it's such a inhuman slogans. So could you just translate some of them, and so that will end our my question for today. Mandarin, you there?
Okay. I'm looking at these pictures right now. I mean, they are going real. Okay, so if everybody in the village have everybody in the village have a second baby, the how should I say, the village head will not be responsible. Yeah. So this one is I would rather have a river of blood than having one more kid. That
Yeah.
one was pretty disgusting.
Mhm.
And this one is plant. Oops, that
This one.
rotated away.
Let's go this one. If you don't get abortion, they will just tear down your house and they will get your cows.
Yeah, yeah.
Basically, cut
So
off your economic source.
yeah, like I said in my presentation, most of the Chinese peasants they don't really have the economic power to purchase more than farming equipment. So cows are extremely important for for the rural Chinese people. Yeah, so that was telling the rural Chinese people is that if you dare to have one more kid, the government will come in and take away your cow, and then you basically you have no means to cultivate the land anymore. So then you probably will starve to death, or you will die in despair.
Yeah.
Which is
So one thing I
And-
need to add about
Yeah.
this poster is like we can see a clear like controversy. Like the CCP have a policy in the morning and then they change it completely or turn to the opposite in the evening. Like one of the posters said, okay, so if you don't get abortion, they will get your cow and they will shut down your house. And then the other one is like, okay, so this one is like get abortion, and you just can't give birth to the baby. And then you can see another slogan with a red background saying that you can get pregnant and then you can give birth to it and then you can raise it up and then you can't get abortion. So that's if I have translated clearly. So one slogan said like dozen years ago said, okay, so you can do everything to get rid of this child by abortion, by anything you can to get rid of this baby. You just can't have it. And then several decades later, then there's another slogan you see on the wall saying that, okay, you can do everything. Like you can get pregnant, you can give birth to the baby, you can raise it up with the help of the whole village. One thing you can't do is just to get abortion. So when you live in a country like this, when they messed up with your mind, and then you don't know what is the right thing to do, then just most of people just give up of thinking. Like they don't know. They have a policy in the morning, and then they have another policy in the evening, which are completely different or the opposite. So how are these people going to survive, or how can you ask them to be reasonable or to be rational, because the government is messing up with their mind and with their power, with their military and everything. Yeah,
Right.
Alex?
Yeah, that's one reason is Chinese people already used to it, but
Yeah.
I think they're not, stupid. They knew,
Mhm.
but the like you said, the only thing is, they the Chinese Communist Party, they use the military machine to crash it. Anybody who has a different opinion. So that's why people has to keep silence. That's a way they, trying to keep themselves alive. So
Yeah, I have no more questions, Mandarin. The floor is yours.
Okay. All right. Well, that's pretty much the end for today's China 101 and the story behind the one child policy, how they started and how they ended, and how how China right now is in a big mess because of this one child policy. Once again, tune in next week at the same time for China 101. And don't forget to like, comment, and comment down below. And we will see you next time. Thank you. Bye bye.